Hello, I'm Melanie Hayes, Managing Partner at Bethnal Green Ventures. I'm delighted to be joined in conversation today with Sarah Gordon, CEO of the Impact Investing Institute, an independent nonprofit which seeks to grow and improve the efficiency of the impact investing market. Sarah's had an illustrious career. The Institute itself is just about to celebrate its first birthday, and we thought it would be a wonderful time to hear a little more about her views on impact investing and the Institute's plans for the coming year. Sarah, good morning, welcome. Thank you for joining us. I wondered if you might kick us off perhaps by telling us a little bit about your own professional background and how you came to join the Impact Investing Institute and to get involved in impact investing.
Sure, it's nice to be talking to you today, Melanie. So I was a journalist for nearly 20 years before I took over as Chief Executive at the Institute last September. I worked at the Financial Times as most recently as business editor, so writing a lot about Brexit. And before that, I'd run the corporate coverage during the financial crisis. So I thought I could never be busier than when I was doing that from 2008 to 2012, but that hasn't been the case. It's been a very busy year at the Institute, but a good one.
And would you like to tell us a little more about how you came to find yourself at the Institute? What brought you from the FT to there, from Brexit and the crash?
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, in the sort of 3 to 4 years before I left the FT in March 2019, I'd been getting more and more interested in impact investment and in this whole space of ESG investing. It was becoming more central to the sort of mainstream business narrative, and indeed the FT has obviously now launched Moral Money and really covers our world much more extensively than it did. And I was meeting a lot of people involved in this, both as social investors or as policymakers, and including Elizabeth Corley, who was then Chief Executive of Allianz Global Investors, who ran a task force on implementing a culture of social impact investment in the UK. And when I left the FT, she was one of the people who generously agreed to have a cup of tea with me. And this job happened to come up, so it was extremely fortuitous. I mean, the task force had done really important work, as had the National Advisory Board on Impact Investment, these are the two initiatives which merged into the Institute. Both of them had done really important work in sort of identifying the hurdles that existed for institutional investors, which inhibited them from engaging with impact investment. And so it was a very good moment for me, obviously, to be getting really much, for it to be my full-time job.
Yeah. And now that you're at the Institute, what can you tell us a little more about what the Institute's brief is, what its remit is, given it's come from those two sort of task forces? What's its aim?
Yeah, so both those initiatives really did an incredibly valuable job of identifying, as I say, those hurdles across the market. And really what we're trying to do at the Institute is address those hurdles, lower those hurdles. So our mission is to not just increase the impact investment market, both in the UK and internationally, but critically to improve its effectiveness. So, we believe that there should not just be more impact investment. Indeed, I mean, I believe very strongly that this is the future. I mean, all investment will be impact investment, or at least investment where businesses and investors account for their negative as well as their positive impacts going forward. But so not just to grow the market, but really to make sure that it is as effective and accountable and going to the places and the people who most need it. So that means we've designed our work programme. Really, we've got sort of different buckets of what we look at. So we want people to really, I mean, one of the problems, as you'll be aware, Melanie, is that for a lot of people still, they don't actually understand what impact investment is and what its benefits are. So we have a very broad engagement and events programme to help people just raise awareness of impact investment and its benefits. And then we've also done sort of specific work in that around elements that really inhibit, for example, pension schemes from engaging with impact investment. So, for example, we've done a big piece of work around fiduciary duty, because pension scheme trustees often believe that impact investment is incompatible with their fiduciary duty, because they believe wrongly that it always implies sacrificing financial return. So we've done a very specific piece of work around that. Then our second focus is on competence in impact investing, and we've developed a learning framework for financial services professionals. It's going to go live on our website at the end of 26th of November, when we have our anniversary event. Then one of the things I found most powerful in conversations with investors and policymakers is if you can show people what has been done already. That's far more powerful than, for example, us at the Institute saying you should be doing this. If we say, look, people like Bethnal Green Ventures, people like Bridges have, these are some of the investments that they've done. This is what impact investment looks like in real life. So we're building up an evidence base around not just impact investment in the UK, but with a particular focus on social housing, which is another focus of our work, and on pension schemes outside the UK and what impact investment they've done in the developing world. And then we've got a big piece of work around reporting and also around policy and regulation.
Goodness. So a very broad range of activities there. And in terms of, you've touched on a number of asset classes, a number of groups of investors, and a number of aspects of raising awareness and engagement and understanding and participation in impact investing. Given where we are now, what would be your observations about what has changed even in the last year since the Institute launched? It's been a funny old year in lots of ways, but how do you think the field has changed even in that shorter time? And I guess also anything that you think has also sort of markedly changed perhaps since those task force first looked at the barriers, for example.
I think that it's been an awful year, obviously, in terms of the havoc and suffering that's been caused by the pandemic, both in the UK and internationally. I think one of the things it has done, though, is really speed up the momentum for the work that you and I are engaged in. I'm hesitant to say it's a good thing, because obviously we all wish this hadn't happened, but I think what it has done is brought people really absolutely face to face with our vulnerabilities as a society, not just internationally, globally, not just in the UK. And that really I think it's made something like the climate emergency, for example, much more real. This thing that you don't really think it's going to happen, but then frankly, terrible things can happen, and we need to be stronger. We need to have stronger, more equitable societies across the globe to be able to resist a pandemic or a crisis like this. So, and I think, frankly, one of the reasons that I decided I wanted to be involved in this work is because it was so clear that the momentum was building anyway. And of course, we've seen huge inflows into ESG funds during the pandemic. And I think individuals, this really matters to individuals. They want the climate emergency to be addressed, and they want their investments to be used, if they can, to deliver benefits for people and the planet. So I think that's enormously helped. I think that there are also a number of really important developments that have happened during the year, which are also really going to speed things up. One is the very live discussions internationally around global convergence of impact reporting and measurement standards. And you've had a joint statement of intent by a number of standard setters and other relevant bodies to work towards convergence, which is a massive achievement and something that I know the Impact Management Project and others have worked incredibly closely to achieve. That's a very important potential next step, because until we have globally agreed standards, it's going to be very difficult for investors and individuals to have real transparency and to be able to hold investors and businesses to account for this, for the impact that they deliver. And we also believe we want life to be easier for businesses and investors, not more difficult. And one of the things that, as you'll know, is so difficult at the moment is those businesses and investors which are trying to do impact investment are having to work with a plethora of different metrics, proprietary or provided by multilateral organisations. So we need to simplify things. And the other very specific development was obviously the announcement by the UK government this week of the first in a series of green sovereign bonds. Mm-hmm. And we think this is an incredibly important development, and it's one which we at the Institute, with the LSE and with the Green Finance Institute, worked very hard to show what a green gilt with social elements would look like to the government, to show that it had really significant investor backing from the market. And the reason that's important is because not only does it signal the government's commitment to address the climate emergency and for the transition to a net zero carbon economy, but also that transition should have social benefits, that it's about creating green jobs and opportunities across the country. And what we've seen in other countries like Ireland and Belgium is that when they issued their first green sovereign bonds, local authorities and domestic businesses, it really speeded up their own green issuance. So, what we're about is mobilising private sector capital at scale for public good. And this is a really good example of how more private sector capital will be brought to bear on these incredibly important priorities.
Yeah, an incredibly significant moment. And do you think, given that you've referred to, for example, other countries like Ireland and Belgium had already taken this step, they'd already launched an instrument like this, do you think in general, how does the UK fare in global terms in regards to impact investing? Are we ahead? Are we behind? Are we about sort of average?
I think, there are incredibly deep pools of capital and expertise in the City of London in sustainable finance, as in mainstream traditional finance. I think that there is a real opportunity at the moment for a number of reasons. Obviously the UK is hosting COP26 next November. The UK's chairing the G7 next year. You've got Italy chairing the G20, which in many ways is now a more relevant and inclusive and powerful body, given it represents the voices not just of what used to be referred to as the industrialized nations. Yeah. But in Italy there are many voices, sort of pushing for greater movement on impact investment and ESG investment in general. So I think the UK government has a real opportunity to show leadership in sustainable finance, both because of the natural advantages of the City of London, but also because of these powerful fora in which the UK will be a very powerful voice next year. I think also we need to think about I really believe sustainable finance is the future of investing. Mm-hmm. So we need to get on our front foot in it. And then also there's Brexit. We need to think about what is the offer that the UK financial services industry is going to make to the rest of the world post Brexit. Obviously there are many things that it will still be able to offer, even if it's not as much of a gateway to Europe as it used to be. And I think this is one area where the city could really develop competitive advantage, and apart from anything else, as you'll know, it's responding to what individuals and investors want. This is the way the market is going. So the UK, both at the policy level and at the financial services industry level, is responding, but that's only going to speed up.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think we've long felt that the will is there, and lots of and this sort of this momentum around providing more means for people to genuinely invest, at a personal but also at an institutional level into things that are aligned with their values is really significant and really gathering pace. I'd like to, if I may, zoom in a little bit around tech for good investing, which is the part of impact investing about which we are particularly passionate at Bethnal Green Ventures. You talked about London, obviously, as a financial services centre. It's long been a tech hub in Europe. What role do you see for tech for good investing, both in the UK and more broadly, as part of the impact investing movement and bigger picture?
Yes, I mean, I think it's an incredibly important part of the future. I mean, that's a sort of truism. Everybody knows that. But I think it's both a fantastic impact asset class, but also an enabler. So, you know, looking at sort of both those aspects, I mean, it's in one ways, it's one of the easier sort of asset classes to look at for impact investing, because often the commercial success and scale is fundamentally linked to the ability to generate impact. So if you look at something like education technology, you know, it's very clear that you can, it's a very obvious appeal to investors, but it's also critically, and that goes back to the point we were discussing earlier about sometimes it's difficult to compare and see the impact with something like education technology, you know, something like providing tablet computers to girls in less developed countries. You know, there's a very clear impact, but there's also a very clear way that you can measure the impact and the change over time, which I think, you know, is very important. But I also think it's about, you know, how technology, the role that technology can play in supporting the impact investing market more broadly. So through platforms and products that facilitate and grow the impact investing ecosystem. So, you know, you've got things like you know, Barclays launched, it was one of the first virtual events I was involved in actually in lockdown. Barclays launched their Impact Agora, which is, you know, this fantastic platform where it's to enable deal sharing between accelerators and fund managers and investor networks. So, I mean, I don't know if I'm sure you've looked at it, but
they're on the Agora, yeah.
Oh, right. Yes. But it's a very usable, it's very intuitive how you, as an individual investor, you can go on it and see. I mean, I keep showing it and to my friends when they say, well, how do you actually do this? I say, okay, look, here are some of the businesses that you as an individual can actually invest in. I think the other critical thing is the role that technology can play in enabling better reporting. And we did a report which is on our website, which is precisely about technology enabled impact reporting. We did that in partnership with Deloitte, and if it's both in terms of your initial discussions at a business or as an investor about how you can incorporate impact into your business models and your operations and your investment and your processes and asset allocations. Technology is incredibly important. I mean, I'm sure you're also aware of the work that's being done it's spun out of the Impact Management Project, which is the Impact Alliance, and their their platform that they've developed to enable investors to map their portfolios against the SDGs. So, I mean, you know, there's an explosion of technology platforms and facilitators, really, which is incredibly helpful for us.
And I think that's a really interesting way of thinking about it, that in terms of tech for good is an asset class in and of itself, in terms of technology companies like you mentioned in education that really sort of deliver impact through their commercial models, but then also tech as an enabler for the better working of the impact investing market is really kind of important in unlocking that sort of, you know, making it accessible, making it efficient. Is there anything that you would I suppose sort of want to highlight or draw investors' attention to when they are thinking about moving into impact investing? What would be the things that you would recommend they consider to make sure that they are getting, let's call it, genuine impact, as opposed to perhaps something that might be considered impact light, or you know, perhaps, you know, steering clear of impact washing, I guess, the thing we're all rather wary of?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I would come back to the sort of basic description of what impact investment is, because I think that's really helpful. So our definition of impact investment is investment that is delivered that is made with the intent to deliver positive, measurable social or environmental impact. And I think that every element of that is helpful when you're moving into this field. So the really important thing is to be clear about your intention. and about the impact that you're intending to deliver.
Mm.
And so that's the very first step. And then you need to think about, if that is your intention, how are you going to measure whether you've delivered the impact? How, you know, what sort of framework, what measurement tools are you going to use? And I think, if as a founder, for example, I think you really need to be very clear in your messaging around that to potential investors, because some of the problems that investors and individuals currently have is precisely that vague promises are made of impact that is intended or that will be delivered, without real specifics about the measurement of the impact. And it's, you know, it's not, I mean, it depends in what field you're wanting to go. And we talked earlier about ed tech, where it's often quite easy to articulate the impact, the positive impact that you're delivering, and then reporting on it. There are other areas of impact, for example, around job creation, which is one of the things that we're really thinking about in terms of the work around the Green Plus sovereign bond, because we believe, for example, if you we want to talk about an environmental project categories with very closely associated social co-benefits, it's all very well to talk about job creation, green job creation, as one of the benefits of a green sovereign bond, but how actually are you going to measure that? How are you going to show that jobs have been created because of the use of proceeds of these bonds? But you need to really carefully think that through, and you need to make your messaging around that to potential investors. I think at every stage of the capital raising process, you need to make that clear.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree. We held an event with several family offices probably about 18 months ago now, and one of the things that really came out from that was around how investors that were very keen to engage with impact investing, one of the key things they really wanted to understand was how authentic, how credible, how reliable was the impact that was being reported back to them from the investments they've made. So I think it's really important to shine a light on those things you've mentioned about being clear, what is the impact, and then how are you going to show that that's actually, one, you're measuring it, but two, that it's directly related to the activity you were undertaking, as opposed to would have happened anyway, or perhaps is
exactly. And I think, I mean, we did I mean, for those listening to this who might want more information on that, we did a webinar recently on impact venture capital, and had a number of founders talking on that, about, you know, how you go about how you start, but also how you continue to show that you're delivering impact, and how that interacts with the sort of capital raising process.
Yeah, that sounds super useful. We'll definitely provide a link below this video for people to check that out. Sounds great. We're about out of time, Sarah. It's been absolutely fantastic to hear more about the breadth of things that the Institute is tackling, about your thoughts on the momentum behind impact investing right now, particularly you know, sort of fueled by such a sort of, you know, a significant crisis like the current pandemic. But also, therefore, the kind of the concrete actions and the things that we can do as investors and in our jobs as investors, as well as personally, to really engage with and push for additional investing. So that's really exciting. We'll provide links to a number of the reports and the webinar, for example, that you've shared. So that's super helpful. And thank you so much for your time. And we look forward to the Institute's first birthday, and some of the reports and findings and tools that you'll be releasing alongside that.
Yes, well, thank you very much for speaking to me today. And I mean, you know, it's people like Bethnal Green Ventures and others that have really been the pioneers in this field. So you know, it's very good to share some of our work with one of the pioneers.
Yeah, it's lovely to have a company. We're really excited to see so many people joining in. We're really positive about it. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sarah. We will speak soon. Thank you.
Yeah.